Despite the fact that inflation is skyrocketing on his watch, Donald Trump, in an unhinged Truth Social post this morning, confirmed that he plans to resume the painful and unnecessary trade wars that he triggered with our two biggest trading partners, Canada and Mexico, that he also plans to escalate the painful and unnecessary trade war that he triggered with our third biggest trading partner, China, and that he also plans to start another painful and unnecessary trade war with the entire European Union. All of this that will no doubt make prices for the American people skyrocket even further. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, folks, there seems to be no end to Donald Trump's depravity, despite begging and pleading, not just from liberals and Democrats and the American people, but also conservative economists. Donald Trump is doubling down on the trade war approach. He says drugs are still pouring into our country from Mexico and Canada at very high and unacceptable levels. A large percentage of these drugs, much of them in the form of fentanyl, are made in and supplied by China. More than 100,000 people died last year due to the distribution of these dangerous and highly addictive poisons. Millions of people have died over the last 2 decades. The families of the victims are devastated and in many instances virtually destroyed. We cannot allow the scourge to continue to harm the USA. And therefore, until it stops, or is seriously limited, the proposed tariffs scheduled to go into effect on March 4th will indeed go into effect as scheduled. China will likewise be charged an additional 10% tariff on that date. The April 2nd reciprocal tariff date will remain in full force and effect. Thank you for your attention on this matter. God bless America. So what the hell is Donald Trump talking about? Well, we'll get into it. He didn't mention the European Union in that particular post, but he did yesterday in President Musk's cabinet meeting. This is what Trump had to say about a trade war with the European Union.
We have made a decision. We'll be announcing it very soon, and it'll be 25%, generally speaking, and that'll be on cars and all of the things. And European Union is a different case than Canada, different kind of case. They've really taken advantage of us in a different way. They don't accept our cars. They don't accept essentially our farm products. They use all sorts of reasons why not. And we accept everything of them. And we have about a $300 billion deficit with the European Union. Now, I love the countries of Europe. I guess I'm from there at some point a long time ago, right? But indirectly, pretty directly too, I guess. But I love the countries of Europe. I love all countries, frankly, all different. But the European Union's it was formed in order to screw the United States. I mean, look, let's be honest. The European Union was formed in order to screw the United States. That's the purpose of it. And they've done a good job of it, but now I'm president.
So there you have it. Trump is going to trigger another 3-4 front trade war with the collective European Union. Now, it is true, as we'll get into, that the EU is relatively protectionist compared to other economies like the United States. But again, we're talking about a simultaneous 3 or 4 front trade war with our 3 biggest trading partners and the European Union, which is in the top, I know the top 10, maybe even the top 5. You know, they are collectively an economic powerhouse. And this is going to materially impact, if it goes through, if it's not a bluff, if it goes through, it will materially impact prices for the American people, and they'll be devastating. So CNBC reports Trump says Mexico-Canada tariffs will start March 4th, plus additional 10% on China. China, which already faces U.S. tariffs on its products, will be charged an additional 10% on the same date. The sweeping 25% tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada had been paused on February 3rd for 1 month, but the Trump administration has recently sown confusion about whether they would go back into effect. In a Truth Social post Thursday morning, Trump clarified that they would. We read the post. We'll get into that April 2nd reciprocal tariff date because that's a separate thing. A White House official confirmed to CNBC later Thursday morning that the new duties on Beijing mean U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports will total 20%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average Futures turned slightly negative following Trump's post, but rose when markets opened. The president's post contradicted a timeline laid out earlier Thursday on CNBC Squawk Box by White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. So again, we have further confusion on this. It doesn't seem that the right hand knows what the left is doing. Let's see. The president has made tariffs a core piece of his second-term agenda, touting them as a purported revenue source and wielding them as a threat against other countries. In addition to the tariffs on China, Mexico, and Canada, Trump has ordered a global 25% tariffs on the imports of steel and aluminum, which are set to take place March 12th. On February 13th, Trump signed a presidential memorandum to impose reciprocal tariffs on foreign nations that have duties on U.S. imports. In addition to the tit-for-tat tariffs, Trump's plan would treat certain other policies, such as the use of value-added taxes, as unfair trade practices that warrant tariffs in response. Trump threatens to slap 25% tariffs on EU, says bloc was always meant to hurt the United States. This is also from CNBC. Trump signaled the potential trade measures on Wednesday during the first cabinet meeting of his second term. Let's see. Trump has made it a priority to tackle what he sees as unfair trade relationships with a number of the U.S.'s closest neighbors and trading partners, citing the U.S. persistent trade deficits in which it imports more goods and services than it exports as evidence. Trump claimed, without citing evidence, that the EU had been formed to undermine the United States. The EU was established after the 1993 enforcement of the Maastricht Treaty, building on post-war sentiment of European unity, and cites establishing an internal market and achieving sustainable development among its aims. Again, they're trying to create a relatively closed loop economy among the EU nations, and again, they are relatively protectionist, certainly even compared to the United States. The European Commission data showed that the EU had a trade surplus of about 155 billion euros, which is about $159 billion with the U.S. for goods in 2023, but ran a 104 billion euros deficit on services. Tariffs on the EU imports would likely translate to higher prices for U.S. consumers, with economists already warning of the potential inflationary impact of import duties. European markets are headed for a sharply lower open, and Trump's tariff threat have rattled the EU, which has previously threatened to respond in measures in a proportionate way. The European Commission, the EU's executive arm, responded to Trump's comments by pledging to, quote, react firmly and immediately against unjustified barriers to free and fair trade, including when tariffs are used to challenge legal and non-discriminatory policies. So, there you have it, okay? Trump is, again, three biggest trading partners, 25% sweeping tariff on Mexico, 25% sweeping tariff on Canada, a 10% tariff on China, our third biggest trading partners, which will now escalate to a 20% tariff. Now the European Union, and then reciprocal tariffs against anybody who has tariffs against the United States. So again, by my count, that's at least a 5-front war, tariff war, trade war with major economies across the planet. And again, the economic consensus on this is clear. That's why even the Wall Street Journal, which is a sister publication of Fox, they love Trump. They want Trump to succeed. Are like, please don't do this, because this will create more inflation. Because when you pay the duties, because they're gonna reciprocate with their own tariffs and potentially hurt their own economies just to retaliate. It's going to be a back and forth. There's no winners in a trade war. When Canada and Mexico and China and the European Union respond with their own tariffs, they will suffer as well. But we're not citizens of those countries, or at least I'm not. So I'm focused right now on America, and we're going to suffer as a consequence of Trump's recklessness, to say nothing of what this might do to our trade relationships in the future. This is just stupidity all the way around, which is why even macroeconomists on the conservative side are also calling this for what it is. And Trump's idea that, well, American consumers won't pay for the tariffs, that's absurd. Because once importers pay the tariff, pay the duty, they're going to pass that on to the end consumer, because there's no way they're just going to take the profit hit. And it's been proven that way time and time and time again, especially when the tariffs aren't particularly surgical. They are sweeping, widespread tariffs. Why is he doing this? Again, it's saber rattling. It's to assert dominance on relatively peer nations. And again, this could be a bluff, right? Because we saw, on February 3rd, the trade war that Trump initiated with Canada and Mexico, he paused after they basically dangled car keys in front of his head and say, you know what, we're going to give you all these great things, except the things that they gave him were commitments they already made under President Biden. So Mexico said, we'll give you, National Guard troops from Mexico. We'll put them on the U.S.-Mexican border. Well, they did that under Biden without a trade war being triggered. They basically gave Trump what they've already committed to do under Biden. Canada did the same thing. Canada inked a border deal effectively under President Biden back in December about how they were going to, redeploy and deploy new resources at the Canadian-U.S. border. And they dangled that in front of Trump too. Like, hey, we're going to do all these things that we agreed to do in December under Biden. We'll do that for you. They were planning on doing it anyway. The only novel new concession was the appointment of a border czar, right? We have a border czar, Tom Homan, who's a goon and a thug, by the way. But they said they're going to appoint one as well. This is just, there's no reason for this. There's no reason for this. And if it goes through as he says it will, which Trump is a pathological liar. It's entirely possible that they'll dangle car keys in front of his head again, and he'll be, he'll be pawing at it like a child. And this may not happen, which fingers crossed it does not happen. But if it goes through the way he says he wants it to go through, the way he intends for it to go through, this is going to make inflation, which is already skyrocketing on his watch, skyrocket even further. And that's why it's up to me and you and people like us, elected Democrats and otherwise, to make sure that Trump accrues a political price for this, because facts don't speak for themselves. And if the American people feel the pain of increased prices on Trump's watch, and we already see the polling on this where he's underwater on the economy, and they know to draw the connection between Trump's actions, Trump's management, and these prices, it could be devastating for the Republican Party in the upcoming midterms. So, in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.